Good morning. As Dave mentioned at the beginning of the service, I'm a professor of classical guitar at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam. And although it seems like ancient history now, it was only a few months ago at the end of January that last spring semester began. It was in all respects a typical spring semester, except that we began hearing rumblings about a new disease in China. And then a few cases started popping up in the United States, and soon after, a few deaths. As February rolled along, we heard more and more about COVID-19. That all changed in March as we neared spring break. Faculty were told that we should begin developing just-in-case websites for each of our classes in the event that we switched to all online learning. And sure enough, just a week later, the college announced that the campus was closing and that for the remainder of the semester, we would be teaching all of our classes virtually online. And so after the break, we began the second half of the spring semester, the hardest half semester in my 31 years of college teaching. There were so many challenges. I had taught an academic class online many times before, but now I had to teach music performance classes, which brings a whole new set of challenges. I had my hands full making dozens of instructional videos. Private lessons can be taught remotely to some degree, but too often the sound quality was horrible because students did not own or could afford external microphones. And some students had such weak internet signals that not only was the audio bad, but their video froze at least once every 2 minutes. Not exactly a conducive way to study Bach. I taught a beginning guitar course to music education majors who might need to know how to play or teach the guitar someday as a public school music teacher. Normally, the college provides them with guitars to use for the semester, but there was no way to get them into the hands of the students who were scattered all around the state. So I had great difficulty finding instruments for them to use. But these challenges were met, some with more success than others, and the semester chugged along. Then came the emails. The first was from an academic advisee of mine. He had totally misread one sentence in a previous communication from me and fired off an extremely nasty note accusing me of incompetence as an advisor. I am ashamed to admit it, but I responded in kind with an angry email that pointed out how many times he had stood me up for advising appointments and showed him point by point how all the information I had given him was not only accurate, but also timely. And I ended by telling him that he would need to find another advisor. Right on the heels of that, I got a few emails from students who said they hadn't known that there was going to be a test the next day, and they wanted to postpone the test by a week. Two of them used phrases like, "Many of my colleagues feel the same way," and "I know some other people in the class are a little surprised by it as well." I have to tell you, those kinds of lines really push my buttons. So again, I got angry at those whiny-ass students, lazy whiny-ass students, and fired off an email to the class telling them how disappointed I was in them, pointing out that I didn't understand how they could have missed that we were having a test. The test had been announced 2 weeks prior and was posted in 3 different spots on the website. The next day, I received a very thoughtful, well-written reply from one of the students. "Dear Dr. Rubio, I hope this email finds you well and able to enjoy the hopefully warmer weather. I was not among the students who emailed you about the playing test. However, I do share the sentiment concerning the upcoming playing exam, and I wanted to take a moment to answer your question of how it came to be a surprise." She went on to tell me of her heavy course load and how most professors were requiring more work in the class than they had in the first half of the semester. But then she added, "Aside from schoolwork, I now have a home life with all the necessary responsibilities that come with a home life, like chores, cooking, and a part-time job. Besides the responsibilities of school and home, I also have to contend with the overwhelming stress that comes from having 3 family members potentially sick with COVID at different times over the last 2 months and having to be caretaker for one of them at one point. I wanted you to know that I am doing the very best that I can with the situation that I am in. It made me deeply sad to hear that a professor was disappointed with me. My life right now is very different from the one I had in Potsdam. I don't know what my classmates' reasons are for not being on top of the class. I only know my own. However, I do think that each of us are in situations outside of our control and that we are truly doing the best we can. Please continue to have patience and understanding with us as we finish the last couple of weeks of the semester. And I personally will continue to do my best. As I read the last part of this calm, well-reasoned note, I was surprised to find myself crying. In a very gentle way, this young woman had called me out, and I realized that I had not lived up to my own personal ideals of kindness and understanding. And it wasn't until then that I realized just how extremely stressed I was myself. I never would have sent those angry responses in any other semester. But her email was a wake-up call about the very poor condition of my own state of mind. As obvious as it should have been, I had not yet acknowledged how bad off I was. I am reminded of George Harrison's song, Beware of Darkness, where he sings, "Watch out now, take care. Beware of the thoughts that linger, winding up inside your head, the hopelessness around you in the dead of night. Beware of sadness. It can hit you, it can hurt you, make you sore, and what is more, that is not what we are here for." Watch out and beware indeed. The stress and depression had crept alley and attacked me from behind. But this wasn't supposed to happen to me. I was the lake lifeguard in my high school and college years who made over 50 rescues and who gave first aid to many more than that. I kept my head in emergencies. I am the person with a regular meditation practice that's supposed to keep me tranquil when there is turbulence around me. On top of that, I recognized that I am in a position of immense privilege. My wife and I were able to keep our reasonably well-paying jobs and work from home, a home that is comfortable and spacious. I and all my immediate and extended family members were safe and healthy. And even after 36 years of marriage, I still really liked my wife's company. So what gave me the right to be stressed and depressed? But there I was. And I knew I had to do something proactive to get my head in a better place. I needed to open up my heart to greater compassion. The first step was to send that beginning guitar class another email apologizing for the previous one, letting them know that I recognized what difficult circumstances they were in, and pledging that I would be more understanding in the future. It turned out that I would need as much of that understanding as I could possibly muster. Once I sent the apology email out, students started opening up to me about the problems they were facing. There was Jeff, none of these are real names, by the way, who did poorly on a guitar playing test, and then tearfully explained to me that he was exhausted, not having had more than 2 hours of sleep a night for the previous 2 weeks. His father had been laid off and his mother was not working, and so he took a full-time job to put food on his family's table and pay the rent, all the while trying to keep up with a full-time student course load. And he added that he was also not feeling well that day and thought he may be coming down with something. And then he fell off the map for 3 weeks. When he rejoined the class, he told me that he had indeed caught COVID-19. He recovered just fine, but he was so far behind in his classes that he didn't know if he'd be able to pass any of them. I told him not to worry about passing mine. There was Joni, who had a compromised immune system from a battle with Lyme disease. Her mother and father were considered essential workers in a food service and had considerable face-to-face contact with customers every day, many of whom didn't wear masks. Joni's sister also lived at home. She was a nurse in the intensive care unit of a hospital on Long Island, which after Manhattan and Brooklyn was ground zero for the first wave of COVID-19. Joni spent her days cowering in her room, afraid to go into the rest of the house because of what her family might have brought home with them. There was Chris, who uncharacteristically began doing very poorly in all his classes. I found out that he'd become addicted to opioids and had tried to quit cold turkey several times, but that just wasn't working for him. I'm still helping him as best I can from afar, trying to convince him to get into rehab. But of course, federal law prevents me from letting anyone close to him know that he is in trouble. Opioid overdoses have spiked dramatically around the country during the pandemic. 2 different woodwind students at the Crane School of Music had mothers who died of opioid overdoses during the lockdown. One of those students is now the sole caregiver for her younger siblings and is unsure if she'll be able to return to school and finish her degree. A curious and unfortunate thing about this pandemic is that so much of the pain and suffering is hidden from us. We've all been isolated in our own homes, and although we see the aggregate numbers and scenes from hard-hit hospitals on the news, our lack of social connection prevents us from truly seeing how this disaster and its financial and psychological repercussions are affecting people. But hearing the stories of students like these puts faces on the hardship that so many are enduring. I've been thinking a lot about hope recently, although other people seem to understand what it means. I've always thought of it as a very abstract concept that is hard for me to grasp. I mean, who doesn't wish that things will go well for ourselves and for the world, even when we're in dire straits? Is that the same as hope? So what does it mean then when we say that somebody has lost hope? I think maybe it means losing confidence that having hope will do any good. So you can hope that things will get better in the sense of wishing things to get better, but still reach a point where you have no confidence that things ever will. There was a wonderful passage in last week's sermon by Professor Claudia Ford. She says, "I experience a profound sadness for the loss of hope and the energy it takes to redefine and renegotiate with hope on a daily basis. Incessantly, I experience the discomforts of exhaustion and frustration, and I am afraid." So that is our difficult tasks as teachers, as human beings. As Max Kutz suggested in our reading, we need to look directly at the suffering of our students and friends in this crisis with clear-eyed and rational compassion, help them in any way we can. And the trick is to do so without sinking into our own despair and losing our own confidence that there will be better times ahead. We need to redefine and renegotiate with hope on a daily basis. One way to look directly at this crisis is to actually embrace it as a remarkable but regrettable part of our lives. This seems extremely counterintuitive, but consider our opening hymn. The first 2 verses talk about good things to be thankful for, but the 3rd verse is strikingly different. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass. We come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. We come with praise and thanks for all that is our life, even a pandemic. This is easier said than done. After my realization that I needed to work on my mental health, I proactively undertook a few activities that I was confident would help me renegotiate with hope and to give praise and thanks for my daily pandemic life. These things weren't new to me. In fact, they're the things that I've known all along are the keys to my staying grounded. But I needed them more than ever, so I was consciously more diligent about pursuing them. The first was to exercise outdoors every day. Not only does this give me a healthier body, but it is even more important than usual because otherwise I could spend easily every single hour of the day indoors in this same house. The second was to be more conscientious about my meditation practice. And specifically, I added more Buddhist meditations on gratitude and loving kindness. The former to remind me of the multitudinous blessings I have in my life, and the latter to open up my heart to greater compassion for my fellow human beings. In the loving kindness meditations, I contemplate the suffering of others with an attitude of love, kindness, and generosity. And I've discovered an ironic truth that doing so does not push you further into darkness and despair, but rather it actually lessens your own suffering. Third, I try to play the guitar every day. It may shock you that as a professional musician like myself, I don't practice every day. But the fact is that I've been at this guitar playing thing for a long time. And now in my late middle age, I admit that it's sometimes a chore to force myself to sit down and practice. Nonetheless, I've learned from decades of experience that I am always more settled and sleep better at night when I've practiced the guitar for at least an hour or two that day. So now I force myself to make it a daily ritual, even when I don't have performances coming up. And finally, I attend our virtual church services on Sunday, even when, like my practicing, I might not always be that enthusiastic about it when I start. But this helps keep my focus, a focus that is way too easily distracted on the things that are the most important in life, and also gives me the sense of solidarity that Max Kutz referred to when he advised us to rejoin the community, even if it is a community of pain. These things are the proven things that bring calm to my own life, mind, and soul, even when there is turbulence around me. And I am happy to report that I am doing much better. Like Frodo in The Lord of the Rings, I wish none of these current events had happened in my time. But as Gandalf told him, so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Wise words. For my part, in this time of COVID-19, I choose to use my time to be one of those people that others, especially my students, can count on for stability, help, love, and compassion. As the lyrics in our closing hymn put it, to be that guide whom love sustains, to be that helper nothing daunts, to be that teacher faith directs. May it be so.